critical mass. So internally, unfortunately, there is a critical mass for that, and that's the problem. And I see so many hands up.
Yeah, very sorry, guys. I dropped just to very briefly conclude my thought. I think there's a construction in Western media of quote unquote the Russian liberal that's problematic. I think Konstantin laid out the reality that's absolutely appropriate. But I think that in the West and in the United States in particular, because we have a very like shallow understanding of Russia, there is this kind of a construct of the Russian liberal, and I think it's used sometimes to sort of to detract from Ukrainian voices, if that makes sense, right? We start talking about Russian people suffering and how we need to do things to engage with Russia to minimize their suffering and to make them change their thinking and their beliefs, and then we start kind of ignoring Ukrainians, and I think that's kind of where like my problem with the idea of the Russian liberal comes from. It tends to distract from the Ukrainian side of things, but that's just like my brief take. So I know we have a lot of hands. So I'll turn it over to Ben. Ben, go ahead.
No, I don't have much to say. I just wanted to say how admirable Constantine cool-headedness and sense of fairness is. He's perfectly right. The thing with the Russians is that to a large extent any organized opposition has been crushed, and as a result only a few individuals are managing to make their voice sound and contradict other people. I'm sorry, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm starting to sound even more stupid than usual. So anyway, thanks a lot, Constantine. This was most needed. Okay, as you mentioned, a lot of hands have been raised, but our favorite skateboard fanatic, Maddie, has joined, and I'm sure we'll all be very happy to hear what he has to say.
I think finance was first.
Yeah, finance spoke already a lot.
Oh, all right. But yeah, everything that Joseph mentions and is absolutely correct. There's a huge problem with the perception of the Russian liberal on Western media. Of course, Navalny is one of the most vivid examples out there. He's been everything you've mentioned is true. He called the Georgians rodents. He promoted for a more aggressive Russian invasion of Georgia back in 2008. He actually called for the use of cruise missiles to bomb Tbilisi, which is the capital of Georgia. He actually called for the entire capture of the country, which is absolutely insane. But something that should not be forgotten is where his political career started. It started with memberships in little-known parties or unpopular parties, but then he gradually shifted over into Russian ethnocentric policies or ethnocentric views. He started attending far-right rallies, the so-called Russian marches, where people would wave that old imperial flag, black, yellow, and white. The same flag that is currently used by the Russian Imperial Movement, which is a recognized terrorist organization by the United States and Canada. It's, to briefly describe it, I view this organization as kind of an unholy mix of ISIS and the German Nazi Party. If that is at all possible, the Russians made it. Their central policies are basically on ethnocentrism, on Russian ethnocentrism, supported by their strong beliefs in their version of Christianity, which is Russian Orthodoxy. Anyway, there are also other examples of the so-called Russian liberals, starting from the politicians all the way to the pop culture people. In the past, we have Solzhenitsyn, who was hailed as a powerful dissident from the Soviet Union. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, guess what happened? He wrote a piece describing how the Russian Empire should look, which included all of the territory of Ukraine, all of Belarus, and pretty much all of Kazakhstan. So was he a dissident? Sure, he didn't like the Soviet authorities, but was he a Russian imperialist? Yes, absolutely. We've also got other examples, such as a somewhat famous, at least in the Russian-speaking world, Oleg Tinkov. He's a banker. He's not a politician. He's a banker. He's been quite successful. and his enterprises. I can't say that he's got close ties with the Kremlin. That kind of an accusation is kind of difficult to throw around because I haven't seen anything to support that. But at the same time, he's the one who proclaimed that Putin should be made Tsar. I know some people might say right now that I'm taking things out of context, but given that thing, it was in an interview with a popular Russian YouTube blogger, Dud, I can't remember his first name, and the conversation went along the lines of, "Hey, nothing really changes in Russia. How about we just make it formal and declare Putin a Tsar?" While on its own, as an isolated incident, it might seem benign, but when you consider other things that he posted on Twitter back in 2014 and 2015, calling the Ukrainians chokhos and calling for a more aggressive Russian invasion, you kind of start to realize that even though he's not a politician, and he's supposed to be a heavily westernized Russian who's a very successful businessman, or actually even a banker, he shouldn't have such strong ethnocentric imperialist views, but he does. And yeah, I'm not going to give you any examples that are just glaring fascists, for example, Malafeev and so on and so forth, or even Rogozin. Well, we all know who Rogozin is. There's just way too many. And while I do partially agree with Konstantin that not all Russians are terrible, but at the same time, right now, some people in the West have this, I think, an unhealthy obsession of looking for those good Russians as fast as possible. I think it's a waste of time. Back in the late 1930s and early 1940s, sorry, Axel, but nobody was looking for the good German. Nobody. When Dresden happened, it just happened. They just bombed the shit out of the city. Pardon my French. And it's even now when we're dealing with, we're not dealing with Russia. Ukraine is dealing with Russia. We're just outside observers for now. We are dealing with a country that is not much different from the ethnocentric Third Reich that we saw back in the 1930s or early 1940s. They still want to promote the same concept of Lebensraum, which is just poorly imitated by the Russians in the Ruski Mir. And yeah, it's just, I understand that people want to find those good Russians because they want to see a way out of this, and later on, they hope that those people will take over and fix the country. But I think in this space, we've discussed ad nauseum that Russia doesn't change. Russia just does the same things over and over for the past few centuries. So the only way, at least from my personal perspective, is the way to fix the situation and stop Russia from being a persistent colonial aggressor is just to get rid of it, decolonize it. There will be a Russia afterwards, of course. It'll just be a much smaller Russia without all of those colonies, such as the countries in the Northern Caucasus, the countries in the Russian Far East, or even the countries like Tatarstan and Bashkortostan, which are not that far away from Moscow. Excuse me. And while there are good Russians, it's not our problem to look for them. They got to sit in their country. They got to take active measures and active steps to fix their country. Konstantin did mention the concept of critical mass. Yes, it does exist. When the Russians want change, they do take decisive actions. We've seen those decisive actions back in August of 1991 when the communist hardliners tried to topple the authorities and ensure that the Soviet Empire survives. And guess what happened? 500,000 Muscovites took the streets and ensured that the communist hardliner coup doesn't actually succeed. So unarmed civilians came out in numbers and ensured that the tanks do not, and the Soviet military doesn't actually oust the government. Something like the same happened a lot. And keep in mind that August coup, the protest during the August coup of 91 happened as the Soviet Union was collapsing. So those people did not know what it means to be free. Those people did not know what to have access to the information from the outside. There was no internet. There was some free press, kind of, given Gorbachev glasnost policies, and even those were kind of a wishy-washy attempts of ensuring that the Soviet Union stays. And another example of large collective action by the Russians was the constitutional crisis of '93. Even though the protests back then did not succeed, Yeltsin managed to ensure that his constitutional reforms do go through. They still took to the streets in very large numbers. And there's an expression in the Russian language that I like, but that the Russians kind of use it sometimes, but don't really. It's всех не пересажают, which means they can't imprison everyone. It's just the truth. There's not enough prison space for the people out there. They do go out and take collective actions in large numbers. Sure, some people might get shot, but look at what the Ukrainians did back in 2014, or during the Maidan protests. They were getting shot, and people didn't disperse. It only pissed them off. So I don't know what the Russians are afraid of. The only conclusion that I personally come to is that they're perfectly fine with anything. As a larger group, as a nation. I'm not talking about specific individuals. All right, end of tirade.
No, thanks, Marty. I appreciate it. We'll let Konstantin follow up there. Go ahead, Konstantin. And one thing I will say, I mean, Konstantin's been shot at by Russians, so I mean, I think his perspective is very important, obviously. So go ahead, Konstantin.
I agree on the most parts, and there is a lot of talk of revoking visas from Russians, and my idea is just keep an open door, because if you want Russians to and I do that's the target for me, at least. that's my dream, that Russia would get decolonized, and all those states would break free, the ones that you named, but for that to happen, I think there should be an open door and as an example, I mean, denying all the visas for everyone, for example, as I see, is a bad idea. It's like getting a refugee status, getting an asylum status in other countries. For me, the process has to be different. Is that when a person wants to travel outside, he has to, I would say, prove it that he's not a part of this regime. He does not want to be anywhere close to it. But at the same time, the idea behind this is, for me at least, is just to keep this door open, because they need to travel outside. People have to see what's happening outside, because North Korea, for example, right now a closed state. It's not, nothing is happening there. It's not going to be liberated. It's not going to be. There will be no revolt inside it that will change everything. And they don't know how external world lives. And for me, there are some limits on of what you can do. And when someone says, let's find good Russians, my approach here is just, no, let's not. It's not us who should find the good Russians. It's them who should, who should show that they're good Russians. Because a time for looking for good Russians have passed as soon as they cross the border with Ukraine. That's now their liability, their how you say this, responsibility to show that they oppose that, and we just have to. That's my opinion. We have to provide them mechanisms that would allow them to prove that they actually don't want to be part of that, and give them the ways of not being part of it. That's my whole point, in saying that not all Russians are bad, because in general, when I pick, if you would pick random Russian inside Russia, he would be probably the bad guy right now, and it's up to him. If it's 75%, it's up to them to distinguish them from other part. How are they gonna do it? Well, that's where I think the free world can step in, by providing them the means of of communication, and keeping at least some channels open. I don't know how exactly to do it, but it's just a thought and a way of looking into it. And I'm not saying that okay, let's do this or let's do that. I think that has to smart people who know social engineering, who understand how propaganda works, how everything works. Lots of smart people have to sit around and in a course of couple of months come up with a program that would be centralized and allow to keep that door open. I hope that makes sense. So I'm gonna end my speech here. Thank you.
No, thank you, Konstantin. I think it made sense. Just kind of maybe two slightly different paths to the same objective. I think you guys both made great points. We got a couple of hands. I know, Andrew, that was kind of your original question. So, I mean, did that kind of answer it? Do you have any maybe follow-up question?
No, I think my question has been thoroughly wined and dined and tucked into bed. It's been laid to rest. Thank you. Very insightful.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a good topic. It's definitely like an interesting issue. Does someone want to add something real quick? No. Okay. We'll go to the next hand. So Bertrand Russell's puppy, who Joe renamed to Italian Bob. Please go ahead.
So it's 4 a.m. here where I am, so just don't expect too much coherence, but I just need to come up to say the following. I do think that Konstantin right now is the most important voice in this space, and I thank him endlessly for what he's saying. He is the most moral voice we have. Most likely in this space, I would say a vast majority of the people here some type of connection with Ukraine. And it is easy and justified to some extent to, get just have the temptation to hate all Russians that are currently committing genocide towards the people that we have, connection with. So it's very, very easy to just hate them all. And the fact that someone like Konstantin comes here and is reminding us that this is frankly not the right and not the most practical thing to do is such a breath of fresh air that makes me just feel better. It's very difficult for a non-Ukrainian to say what he just said, because it feels to some extent that you might be apologizing for a country that is frankly collectively, not just like the top, but collectively committing genocide. If I were Ukrainian myself, I frankly would probably not resist the temptation of just say, Russians are all evil, just kill them all. Konstantin is better than me. And I am happy that there is someone like Konstantin who is able to be, despite the circumstances, able to being a voice of reasons and make sure that we keep a critical thinking on the topic. I would just want to add one quick thing. I disagree. I agree with Madi most of the time, frankly, and I admire his breadth of knowledge and his ability to take a broad view on historical events. I disagree on one thing, which is the fact that nobody was looking for a good German during World War II. I would say that this is not consistent with the historical record, and it's not consistent, frankly, with Thomas Mann. There was a guy called Thomas Mann and a few others, not many Germans, frankly, not many, has to be said, but a few guys. Not Jewish, not necessarily persecuted, not having direct reasons to be, directly in clash with the Nazi regime. He was welcome in the Western world, and he was, recording anti-Nazi statements that were broadcast in Europe by the BBC. So I think that we should keep in mind that even during, the Holocaust, we had some Thomas Manns, and we don't want to lose the sight right now on the fact that in order to win this battle, there are probably some Russians that we should keep in mind that might be like the Thomas Manns, so that can help the free world, defeat the genocidal regime and to a large extent the genocidal country. So I'm not saying that a vast majority of Russians are not guilty. They are. But Konstantin is reminding us that we should not have, the idea that all of them, no matter what, are guilty. That's all I want to say. It's 4:10 a.m., so I hope that it made some sense despite the time right now. Thank you.
Yeah, all you Europeans are really staying up late. You go to bed. This is your mom. Go to bed. But yeah, we'll give Madi maybe a brief opportunity to respond there, and then we'll go to Jonathan. Madi, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. Yeah, Bertrand, you're right. There were some good Germans and some propaganda efforts and some intelligence efforts were taken to find them to ensure that the Nazi regime could be more efficiently undermined. But when we're talking about the modern times, the reason I say the things I'm saying is because Western media is obsessed with finding the good Russians. And when that happens, they immediately platform them more than the Ukrainians, which I find to be absolutely mind-boggling and insane. That's why I'm saying those things. So, are there good Russians? Sure, maybe they are. But should Western media actually go actively try to look for them and find every single one of them? No, it's a waste of time right now. So that's it.
Yeah, I think we're maybe talking about two separate issues to some extent here, right? There's the question of whether or not we should elevate the voices of sort of the Russian liberals or the Russian opposition, as it were. And then we're just maybe Konstantin's talking about a broader strategy of the West. But I guess originally we were talking about this visa ban, but I kind of brought in the Russian liberal angle. So I think both can be true in a sense. But so thank you, Madi. That was some great follow-up. I'm going to let Jonathan go because he's been very patient. Jonathan, go ahead.
Hello. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Not really a question, just a statement. I know there's some people who are older than me. Certainly remember in the 1980s, everyone was looking for a good Russian. Everyone was looking for defectors. And guess what? They were all Ukrainian. Yakov Smirnov, Natan Sharansky, and probably a million more I can't remember off the top of my head. But they were Ukrainians, pretty much. But the only difference I see historically from when I was a kid in the 80s and now is there isn't quite as much restriction on movement in Russia. So the good Russians left. They voted with their feet and they left the country en masse. I was just talking to this guy from Moscow and he was in Tbilisi. So I said, "Oh, you're from Tbilisi?" He's like, "No, I'm from Moscow. I had to get the hell out of there. It was too much." So I if you want to look for good Russians, they left the country. If they're, I'm not one to decide who's a good Russian or if there are, and I agree we should not be looking for them. They should be seeking to help Ukraine. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Next, let's go to Constantine. Constantine, go ahead.
I do believe that Russia should be hit hard with sanctions, and those who, all the Russians who stay over there, who choose, to support the regime, to pay taxes over there, should be hit as hard as it possibly can be done. And if we're talking about military, for example, someone mentioned, I think Mari mentioned Germany, and the Second World War, when Germans, no one cared about if you're good or bad. That's what I think as well. I mean, let's not think, oh, there are good Russians, let's not try, let's make sure that our sanctions don't touch them. No, it should not be like that, because then you're basically saying that we don't care about sanctions at all. Let's just sanction 3 people around Putin, and it will have absolutely zero effect, because trust me, I will have my friend buying whatever I want for me and not myself. So it's stupid, it's not working, and that approach does not work. But what I'm just saying is just, keep the venue for those who are like, I'm sorry, Jonathan just said, I mean, most of them left the country, but trust me, not all of them. It's hard, to pick up your things and leave, especially when you have family, especially when you have elderly people like your parents that are over 70, 75 years old, that have no means to exist, and they, some have people who are sick, and trust me, healthcare system in Russia is not that perfect as right-wing, far-right in the United States try to portray it. So it's not that easy. People are leaving. They will keep leaving. And what I'm just, what I want to, keep this open venue for those people who want to leave. But when they do, when they get those visas, you have to, that's what I think, you have to, keep make sure that those are not just, Putin supporters and genocide supporters or Russian imperialists that are leaving the country, and just cheering and keeping their fists together, hoping that Ukraine will lose and be absorbed by Russia right now. How you do that, I don't know. It's not that straightforward. It's not that easy, especially with the laws in the West that say that with the freedom of speech, I mean, you don't want to, let's be honest, it's a thin line between saying you don't have the right to say this, bad things, between just denying freedom of speech to everyone. So you just have to find that silver lining. It's pretty complex, and that's why I'm saying that smart people who know how this works should focus and derive some strategy that will work, not just some sloppy bureaucracy that will just make this non-existent, and just or right now, like Scholz is saying, just keep the visas and let them come in. It's not their war. Let them come in, and we must also remember that we want to brain drain Russia. We want smart people to leave. We want smart people to leave Russia and never come back.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And real quick, just a housekeeping note. Just a Bunny, I see you down there requesting. I've approved your request, but it's not working, so try rejoining. That happens sometimes. If you guys ever have trouble joining, it's usually just a technical problem. Sometimes I see you trying to join, sometimes we don't. So if you're having trouble, maybe just rejoin, clear your cache if that's a thing. Do some stuff. Restart the app, blah, blah, blah. You guys get the idea if you ever have trouble. And with that, we'll go to finance. Finance, go ahead. Going once.
Everything I was going to say has just been said. I have some questions for Madi on the proposed Azeri Kazakh pipeline, but that's a huge change in topic, so I will wait.
Well, I think let's let Madi close this out, and then actually Andrew asked a question earlier about Central Asia, so maybe it's maybe a good time. Like I said, Madi's like a great resource on that, so we can go to that topic. So Madi, if you want to maybe close this out, we can go to that topic. Go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, Konstantin is definitely a better man than I am, given that he has to deal with the Russians, and I don't. But I fully support the tourist visa ban because it's a privilege that the Russians simply do not deserve. It's not a basic human right. If they want to travel to Europe and spew their propaganda there, they really shouldn't. Draining Russia is definitely a thing that needs to happen, but it's been happening for the past 30 years anyway, because opportunities in Russia are generally not great. Most Muscovites who actually make a decent living and have decent education have been leaving Moscow. And the reason I'm bringing up Moscow, because it is the only viable city. I've been leaving Moscow for quite a while. I've got countless examples from my own personal experiences. And if they want to leave Russia on a refugee visa or as a defector, that's fine. But something to keep in mind for the Western countries is to conduct thorough checks, because even though the Russian military is somewhat incapable, their intelligence services should not be underestimated. They're quite good at subterfuge. They're quite good at masquerading as someone else, presenting themselves as not what they are. There's been a pretty good research back in the 1950s by Harvard. It's actually public. If you Google a Harvard Soviet defector study, you'll quickly find out that all those good Russians, those defectors who left the Soviet Union, responded only in a way that they expected the Americans to like. So, but in reality, what the conclusion that the American researchers came to was that they were still supporting the Stalin's regime. They were still in support of communism. The only reason they left is the only reason they said the things they said because they wanted to remain in the United States. So we're dealing with a country, with a nation that has a deeply ingrained imperialist mindset. It's deep in their culture, in their history. It starts from the very early childhood, where they're taught their own version of history, where they're taught their own version of classic literature, where they just denigrate and annul the right for existence for all of the former colonies, and at the same time promote their greatness. And I recently had a gander at a history book that is used in the Russian high schools, where they teach history. They never mention any single genocide that the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union perpetrated against the former colonies. They never mention any wars of conquest. They're always on the defensive. They're always joining territories. The word conquest is not mentioned a single time. They only mention territories that were either developed or joined into the empire. So when you have this kind of schooling system that's been in place for generations, you've got the Russian culture and the Russian literature that promotes the same imperial narrative. You quickly start to understand that it's not just propaganda. Propaganda is there in place, giving that final nudge, that final push to perpetrate what they're doing right now. The rest of the stuff is already there in their mindset. I'm not saying that it's infecting every single one of them. Maybe some of them are smart enough to realize what's happening, but it's most definitely a vast majority of them.
I want to say how much you're right here, and it's just Will, I don't know, Mari, how old are you? I don't know which education you went through, but in Ukraine, when I was I was born in Soviet Union, and I was, I think, around 6 or 7 when Soviet Union have fallen apart. But even since then, like all the books, all the teachers from the first time I remember myself in the kindergarten, you would be told that Russia has never lost a war. Russia never went to any country. It always was invaded by others, and it was just pushed on our minds since like really early childhood, and it's really hard to resist. It's just at some point, and for me it was surprisingly. I started asking these questions myself when I was pretty young, but I was wondering why is it so big if you have never attacked anyone, or you have never went on someone else's soil. But that's all a different story how to counter that mentality. But you're totally right. It comes from the childhood. You're being told that the Russians are superior, and they literally teach you that it is a superior nation, and it's like Nazism in its absolute form, that it says that Russian race is better than everyone else. And then you have jokes. All the jokes in Soviet Union, they are about other nations. There are jokes about Ukrainians, how they, how greedy, how not friendly they are. They have jokes, a special word how to call them, and there are jokes about absolutely every nationality that was part of Soviet Union, except for Russians. Russians always have to be the best of the best, and you cannot joke about those.
So just a very quick housekeeping note. We have a full panel, which is kind of a rare thing lately. So congratulations, us. I'm a little proud. But anyway, if you guys could, if you don't have an imminent question, just hop down. You can always just hop back up. We are having a couple of people having trouble connecting. So if you are having trouble hopping up, it might have been that, but it might just be you need to restart your phone, whatnot. If you do have a question for our panel, we got a nice full panel. It's one of the best we've had in a while. So please do feel free to come on up and raise your hand and ask your question. So thank you, Madi, for that little final note. I think there's a couple people who really kind of want to speak on this. I know the concept of the Russian liberal and sort of the American or Western media construct of the Russian liberal is kind of a topic that people feel strongly about. So we can continue that, but I think there are maybe a couple just general questions on Central Asia, and we don't get Madi in here a ton these days because he's busy with school. So, Finance, why don't you go with your question, and then if Andrew had any further questions on Central Asia, we can let him ask, and then we can maybe go back. Finance, go ahead.
Sure. Hey, Madi. Two questions, actually. You might know the first one. If you don't off the top of your head, I'll find someone else to ask. One, do you know if there is seasonality to Russian tax receipts?
Overall, or tied specifically to an industry? Overall, of course, there's a seasonality.
As in, is 2Q particularly better or worse? For instance, the U.S. tax receipts are really big around March, right? So Q1 has a big pickup, and then Q2 has a seasonal drop-off. Is there something similar in Russia, or is that big fat tax drop-off? Okay, so that tax drop-off can't be used as an indicator of overall economic activity then?
No, not just yet. Of course, this year's drop, I know what you're talking about. This year's drop is bigger than last year's. And I think the difference is explained by whatever sanctions are being imposed on them right now.
Yeah, I was curious if we could use that to have another estimate of, because taxes are actually a fun way to estimate economic pain when you have a country that is doing chicanery in their statistics, because no one ever pays taxes on business that isn't done. So that's always a fun one if the tax stats are decent. My second question is more robust. Can you talk about this Azeri-Kazakh pipeline? Is this a real deal? Do they have the investment to pull it off? And how would this affect and or be affected by the Russian neighbors?
All right, so there are two versions to the story, actually. There's a version coming from the Kazakh government, and there is a version coming from the rest of the world. According to the Kazakh government, nothing is happening. I think that is a lie. That is a lie that is told on purpose because they don't want to rock the boats domestically. Because domestically, Kazakhstan does have a sizable chunk of the population that is actually supporting Russia. Why is that? 20% of the population of Kazakhstan are ethnic Russians, and of course there are ethnic Kazakhs who are idiots. So there's that. Is the pipeline feasible? I think so, but it requires additional investments. That information there are some details on it coming from third-party sources, but I don't really trust them. The Caspian Pipeline Consortium thing is actually not operating right now. The official version is that the Kazakh oil wells are actually not producing and pumping sufficient amounts to justify it being running. So I think that's a lie too. I think the Russians just shut it down again. So this Azeri-Kazakh deal is a thing of necessity. It has to happen sometime soon. It can actually partially satisfy the transportation demands as of now, but not to the full extent. Not because the pipeline isn't capable of carrying the full amount, but simply because I believe there are not enough tankers in the Caspian Sea to actually transport everything to Baku, which is the capital of Azerbaijan, where the pipeline starts.
Thanks, buddy. Any follow-up on this?
So if this deal gets done, which apparently the Kazakh government is denying is happening, does this have a long-term competitive impact on Russia? I know they'll probably go through the ceiling, but does it actually impact them long-term in any fashion, medium-term in any fashion, or is it just Or is it just beneficial to Kazakhstan for not relying on Russia so much?
Yes to everything. So one of the biggest things that is going to impact them is their ability to bypass sanctions. What they've been doing in Novorossiysk, where the Kazakh pipeline ends, is they've been trying to mix their own oil.
Wait,
with
who is
oil.
they? They is the Russians.
The Russians.
So this pipeline would help the Russians bypass sanctions?
No. The old pipeline, the CPC pipeline, going from Kazakhstan into Novorossiysk. Yeah. So they've been trying actively to mix Kazakh oil with their own oil and present it as Kazakh oil, and then just collect some of the payments from that oil. At the same time, they will be losing income from the pipeline running, because given that the pipeline is functioning, they do get to collect royalties, given that it passes through their territory. And at the same time, it eliminates another mechanism, another instrument of soft power that the Russians could use against Kazakhstan. So, yeah, it just lines up with the most recent actions that the Kazakh government has been taken to distance itself from the Russian Federation, because the Russians have been aggressively ramping up their propaganda efforts against Kazakhstan. They've made some ridiculous claims over the past few months, claiming that they're Nazis in Kazakhstan, apparently. I've never seen any, but they managed to find some. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, apart from that, it's going to have a financial impact, it's going to have a geopolitical impact, and it definitely provides a lot more options for the Kazakh government to react to situations as they develop later on.
Thank you.
Поступил ребенок 17-летний, который по неосторожности или как взял в руки этот предмет взрывоопасный, он взорвался. Ребенок находится на лечении сейчас в детском отделении. Помощь ему оказывается.
Fun, if I could ask, in terms of taxes, were you referring to the thing I sent you about VATs dropping by 40-something%?
Yeah, I'd seen that already. So, but you sending it to me sparked something I'd forgotten you could use to analyze, because I remember when some finance guys I followed were using it to try to analyze China, who has been notorious for cooking their books since long before now. And one of the things that people would do in times of economic stress in China is they would analyze tax receipts year over year, period to period, because at the end of the day, nobody they felt the tax data was good, and nobody pays taxes on business that isn't being done. The problem with tax receipts is how much that business can be pushed from one quarter to the other. So there's a lot of seasonality and like unness to the data. Like, it is not an ideal metric. There's a reason we don't use it, say, here in the US or in any country where your stats are good. But if your stats are bad, tax receipts are actually a pretty good choice if that data is good.
Understood. And can you very briefly explain, I know this is a complicated subject matter, for, perhaps many of our listeners who are in North America, specifically the United States, where we do not have VAT, can you give, a 2 or 3 sentence description of what that is?
It's a sales tax. That's the best way to understand VAT. It's a sales tax.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing.
Мы же чисто по-человечески настучали на них ФСБ, и их куда-то забрали и увезли. А мы опять же чисто по-человечески начали за квартиру.
Do we want to go to Just a Button?
I'm sorry. Were you talking about tax that is in Russia or tax that is in Europe, in European Union?
I believe in Russia, right, France?
Yeah, so one of the things we know is going on is Russia's cooking the books. And we're trying to figure out, me, Madi, many people with higher pay grades than we have, just how much Russia's cooking the books and how bad or not bad their economy is at any given moment right now. We know they're paying a cost for this war at the current time. Skip that long term is bad too. We're trying to analyze how big that is. Russia is trying to regularly say, oh, look, not that big, West paying bigger. Quite frankly, Madi, myself, the guys who do the Yale report all think that's a big old crock of BS. But some of their stats are coming out better than expected, but some of their stat bureaus have been, let me phrase that, their statistics bureaucracy has been completely politicized. So I'm asking around statistics to get around the fact that their statistics bureaucracy is completely politicized, which is a really fancy way of saying they're cooking the books. Now, they're only cooking it a little, so they're not saying bad looks good. They haven't gone full Bernie Madoff here. But they are cooking it some every single time you see something. So, for instance, they reported 80% down for auto manufacturing. Then we discovered that it was 90. Then it came out that they were actually 95 or 96% down for auto manufacturing. 80% down is real bad. Like, that's awful. But 95% down is way worse. So that's sort of the kind of thing you're seeing. So, when things are bad, when they're saying things are bad when they're bad. They're saying things are really bad, but it turns out things are even worse than they're saying it. But when you do that on the margins to every single statistic in every single way, it means that our information on the Russian economy went from decent to really, really bad. Is that a fair explanation, Madi?
Yeah, and it's not a unique occurrence that is happening only now. Them cooking the books is a historical tradition that started in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, that's if in Russia they say that things are bad, they are really bad. If they always exaggerate, and it's just lie build upon lie, and it's not only about the economy, it's about absolutely everything in the country. But I just heard you talking about the sales tax, and I wanted to add one thing, that it's I don't know how VAT works in the European Union, but in Russia it's called NDS. That's like it's translated as VAT, value added tax, I think. But the idea is that each company that sells absolutely anything has this. For example, if you buy something for $50, then you sell it for $100. So the VAT would be paid only from the difference, from the 100 minus what you sell it minus what you bought it for. So you get like in Ukraine we have 20%, I think, in the tax rate now. I think it was lowered a bit, maybe, but not too much. But the idea, it's not like, for example, if you bought an item that costs $5 and you sold it for $5, you don't pay absolutely any VAT. You don't pay any taxes because you bought it for what you sold. I think that sales tax in the United States works a bit differently in most of the states, at least. Is that you just pay, if you sell something for $10 and sales taxes is 10%, you pay 1%, $1 of taxes, and that's it. It doesn't matter how much you paid it for, and this burden, it goes on the shoulder of the buyer. In Ukraine and Russia, the VAT tax, NDS we call it, once again, the seller, the business, is responsible for paying it. So it's a bit different system, and because it varies so much, there are people who trade, VAT. There are companies, for example, has sufficient balance of VAT, and there are companies who have deficient balance, because if you export, for example, then the government would have to pay you this tax, because you, as an exporter, you pay it, but you never sell it internally. So but at the same time you have paid this tax to the company from which you're buying to. But since you're selling your goods outside, this tax goes on your balance, and this is like a weird, quite huge corruption problem that exists in almost all former states, former USSR states that managed to break out, and it's the same in Russia. So when someone is trying to talk about the collections of NDS or VAT in Russia, you must understand that there is so much manipulation in that it's it's like just lie and lie on top of it. So when they say things are bad, things are really terrible. And there is one more thing to this tax, is that they have their government tax agency asking to pay it upfront from the companies, that to make sure that they keep statistics well in order. So it's like insane manipulation and lies.
Thank you very much, Konstantin. I believe Joe's having some connectivity difficulty, where I think we're getting him back up as we speak. Joseph, can you hear us?
Yeah. You talking to me?
Talking to Joe. We'll get to you in just a second, but I just wanted to make sure Joseph's audio is good.
Yep, I'm good. Thanks, guys. Sorry, everybody.
All right, wonderful. Bunny, in that case, go ahead.
Yeah, I almost hate to bring the topic up again now that we finally moved past it, but one thing I've noticed the last, call it about 2 weeks, I've been working a lot and coming home late, tune into spaces, and there's these long discussions about what about the good Russians? What about the beautiful Russia of the future? And things like that. And when I hear that, I think back to what Dzhokhar Dudayev, the president of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, had to say in an interview, where he said, the West doesn't understand Russia. It's like they've caged this wild, crazed bear. They want me to get in the cage, shake its paw, and live peacefully. And, all these concerns about what about the good Russians? What about, all the innocent stuff? Like, these are really abstract questions at a time when, in reality, we need to get Russia out of Ukraine. So anything that helps that along, whether that means just simply making regular Russians angry because they can't enjoy certain privileges and things like that. Maybe motivating them a little bit. Those are all good things as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I know you were trying to get up for a while, man, so I'm glad you were able to make it. It was a full panel. I was too dumb to realize for a little while, but then we switched some stuff around. So, yep. Anyway, thank you very much. I've actually turned over hosting responsibilities to John in finance, so I don't know why I'm talking at this point. I guess just it's sort of a muscular reflex, an involuntary reflex. So I'm going to turn it over to you, John. Go ahead.
Thank you, Joseph. Marty, please go ahead.
Just quick clarification. I never answered Konstantin's question. I am 35. I was born in the Soviet Union. I went through the schooling system that was pretty much unchanged after the collapse of the Soviet Union. I was not born in Russia. I was born in Kazakhstan, fortunately. And yeah, for the first 8 or 9 grades of my schooling education, it was pretty much identical to what was taught back in the Soviet days. So yeah, I know them quite well.
Yeah, and that's like what you were saying is totally in line with that. We went through the same stuff. We're the same age. Like, it doesn't matter how many years I'm younger or older. It's we're the same age, and it's the same system that in which you're being taught that imperialism and superiority of Russians.
Joseph, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess real quick, I guess Jonathan was before me, so I'll let Jonathan go ahead, then we can go to me.
Oh, understood, Jonathan. Sorry, I didn't see your hand
Oh,
down there.
sorry,
please go.
My thumb was too busy. Am I on?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm a little bit older than you guys, and I remember back in the 80s and until all of the Soviet Union, there were these enormous reach out programs, and it's reflected today in things like Voice of America. I've actually
siren
met some
alert update.
really
Mykolaiv,
talented and smart
all clear. This
Ukrainians
message has been
who,
generated with municipal data.
work here in DC for Voice of America. My question, where I was going with this, was first a little background. This guy, early in the war, like the first week of the war, he was I think a teenager or early 20s. To make a long story short, he gets on the Telegram chat with all these Russian youth and tries to reach out to them and says to them, guys, you know what's happening here.
Air siren alert update.
Can you help
Mykolaiv,
us? Are you with
all
us?
clear.
And
This message has been
literally
generated
every
with municipal
single
data.
Russian teenager jumps on there. Goes back to what Mahdi and others were saying about the indoctrination and the teaching. They were using that ethnic slur against Ukrainians, which I shouldn't repeat, and just one after the other was just jumping on, saying that to him. We hope you all die. You're all scumbag, and it just blew him away. There were a few dissenters saying no, we don't agree with that. These are psychopaths, but by and large, most people were jumping on to abuse him. Is there anything you guys think
Air siren alert update.
that can,
Mykolaiv,
after the war,
all clear.
going
This message
forward,
has been generated with
thing the West
municipal
can
data.
do to try to reach out to these people again and try to enlighten them?
I think probably not. I think as of right now, like my view of it is, I don't wish anything bad on Russians. Like I don't really particularly like want to help them or feel any need to engage or interact with them. That's like kind of my view. Like I don't want anything bad specifically to happen to Russia. Aside from, of course, they need to be decolonized. Like the people that they've colonized need to be their own countries for obvious reasons.
Agreed.
But I like, you know, I think that's kind of my belief. But maybe other people in the space. Gurney, did you have anything you wanted to add here? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote our good friend Jerry McDonald here and say that the medium is the message, and perhaps to refine that into this statement or position I'm going to make is, you know, the war right now is the message. The war is the communications, and whatever may happen afterwards, that's going to be dictated by a series of events, both now and in the future. And so I don't know if it's a futile effort to think about these things because you have no idea that future state, whether there's going to be a conciliatory future state or not. And so trying to bend a brain around and waste precious mental power and precious bandwidth on the current, that diverts from the current medium right now, which is the war. So, you know, that future state will come, and that future state will be a solvable, it will not be an intractable issue, but I think asking it now sort of presents it as if it were an intractable issue, even though it may not be. But either way, the current communication, the current medium, the current message is the war, and that's simply all it takes at the moment.
Agreed, but the programs like Radio Free Europe during the Cold War had enormous propaganda effect.
Yeah, but the Cold War was not an overt and hot war, and this isn't the Cold War, true, even if there are Western powers here. So there is no parallel to the Cold War in this instance, relative to the propaganda here, right? Well, I mean, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I think that was a really brilliant point. And let's go to Madi then, Bunny. Madi, go ahead.
Yeah, another concept that really gets a lot of pushback is collective punishment. And every time it's being brought up, people start talking about the good Russians or why every single Russian person should suffer. But the thing is, they're already undergoing collective punishment right now. Those are the sanctions that are being imposed on their country. And what I think is, when people say they don't want to wish anything ill upon Russia, sure, but I personally wish all the ills upon their economy. I hope it just falls apart and stops existing. Of course, it's just wishful thinking, because even if all of the sanctions are implemented upon them, there's still going to be an economy. They'll still be able to produce something. As long as there are people living there, there's going to be an economy. So that's why talking about their economy is so important, because if they do get tax collections, tax receipts, they still get money to pay off their corrupt local satraps and warlords throughout the empire. But as their income starts choking out, they'll be faced with a very difficult choice. They either have to maintain a nice standard of living that the Muscovites are used to in Moscow and St. Petersburg, or they have to dedicate some of the funds from the budget into the colonies that they're holding, for example, Chechnya or Tatarstan. I think the choice will be obvious for them. They will start redirecting the flow of funds from those colonies to maintain the cushy way of life in Moscow. Well, when I say cushy, I mean by Russian standards. And because losing Moscow would be absolutely insane for the Russian regime, they'll have to maintain control in the metropole. Otherwise, they're gonna get ousted quite quickly. But that leaves out all those colonies out there in the dry. So my thinking is that the Third Chechen War is simply unavoidable. I don't know if it's going to happen next year. I don't think so, but it's definitely going to happen at some point in the future. Maybe over the next 5 to 10 years. And when that happens, it could start a very interesting chain of events. Hopefully it does.
It would be especially interesting if in the post-war environment, there are a number of foreign volunteer formations, separate from the International Legion, such as the Belarusian Battalion, the Georgian Legion, and I believe there's at least 2 Chechen formations, the Sheikh Mansour, and then there's one other that the name escapes me. It would be very interesting if each of those formations makes it back to their home country, shall we say.
Thank you, John. I do see we've got Alona up, so please go ahead, Alona.
Hey guys, I know that Justin Bunny, he had his hand raised first, so I'll let him go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say the reason why that Jahar Dudayev quote is so potent, at least to me, is because what he's expressing there is he was very intimately familiar with Russians, the Russian culture, the way they are, the way they do war, what can and can't be done. In fact, he had a lot of really great analyses of Russian culture and what its problems are, what's going to keep it from developing, etc. And during that time that he was fighting a war against Russia, the West largely just spent time thinking about, just daydreaming about this wonderful Russia of the future. And seeing people deeply concerned about that right now as there's a genocide going on is, for me, it's almost disturbingly reminiscent of that very same thing. So what I would say is that I think it's important to stay goal-oriented. Whatever we might want for the future, these things are going to be chaotic, and they're going to shake out how they shake out. But if there's one mistake that the West constantly keeps making, and I can't for the life of me understand exactly why, maybe it's just some sort of, I don't know, perception that Russia is this thing, it's this one singular country, it's not this multi-ethnic empire that crushed thousands of nationalities beneath its heel. Maybe there's a perception like that needs to be broken, but all I'm going to say is stop helping Russia.
Thank you very much, Justin Bunny. Alona, please go ahead.
Hey guys, just to kind of wanted to chime in on this conversation about the good Russians and collective punishment and so on. I've got 2 friends in Russia. They call themselves, both of them are ethnic Russians, right? They call themselves now former Russians because they are embarrassed to be Russian. They both were extremely happy to hear about this initiative about visa bans for Russians. So I was I'm very confused. I think not many people realize that by fighting against that, and first of all, it's ridiculous this kind of debate that's been happening over the last few days that it even needs to be had. But the genuine good Russians that there are, a tiny fraction of them out there. They do exist. They're almost like unicorns. They are all in favor of visa bans for Russians, and they are in Russia. Because they think it's very unfair that Russians should be able to travel to Paris for the weekend, whilst Ukrainians are denied the right to their life. And those Russians that are upset and that are complaining about being discriminated against, that's I think they make a good case for something that I've been trying to communicate, there are no good Russians that should not be held responsible. If someone doesn't feel responsible for what's happening, that's a testament to who they are as a person, as a Russian person. And so, yeah, I'm just I'm very upset that this kind of debate that's been happening in almost every Twitter space, that it needs to be had. And the reason...
Mic check.
I think we lost Alona. Hold on, let me bump her back down and bring her back up.
Right, so...
Alona, very sorry we lost you, so we bumped you down. Please come back up.
She's requesting. We're bringing her back. Welcome back, Alona. Please continue. Sorry about that.
I'll be quick. Russians are not used to be to any kind of restrictions or limitations because they've never been held accountable for anything, and that's the reason why they're so shocked right now. They are more they're more appalled by the possibility of not being able to get a tourist visa than they were about more than they have been about the genocide that's happening right now. All right, that's what makes them mad. And if that's what if that is I can see from their response that this is the kind of thing that will make it work. Like if we are thinking that we may make the same decision to not do anything, right, to not hold them accountable in any way, and we think that as a result of that we'll suddenly get a different outcome, it's a sign of insanity, right, to be making to be doing the same action and thinking that you will get a different outcome for some reason all of a sudden. That's not how it works. If it doesn't, like every diplomatic, like nice way of resolution with them has been exhausted, they need to be ashamed. They need to get used to the thought that they are complicit. They are responsible for this genocide. Each and every of them is complicit. And if they don't feel complicit, if they don't feel guilty, because I am Ukrainian and I feel guilty every day that I didn't do more in the past to prevent this and to tell more people about what was about to happen, I feel guilty. It's not going to kill them to feel guilty for a little bit for the first time. And if we want to stop this and make sure that this genocide never happens again, which is something that should be everyone's priority above the feelings of Russians, then we need to make sure that they are finally, for the first time in their life, are held accountable for this. So pretty much that's about it. I also have a thread going on. It's about Russians in Europe. You can put it up in the nest if you want. It's quite long, but I think it's worth looking through what Russians in Europe do when they go there, either on holiday or the ones who live in Europe. I think it's quite insightful, so I'll put it up if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead, Alona.
Please go ahead.
Well, I mean, Alona said it all, but I just want to corroborate something Alona said, and that's that I know a Russian who lives in Canada right now, and last time he went to visit was 2012, and he made it really clear to me that there is such a refusal to take personal responsibility, and we've
Did we just lose Bloke or me?
We just lost Bloke.
Oh, well. Maddie, go ahead until we get Bloke back.
I just wanted to quickly talk about what Justin Bunny mentioned. So he quoted Jahar Dudayev. He was the first president of Chechen Republic of Ichkeria back in between 1991 and 1995 until the very last day of his life, because he was assassinated by the Russians. The Russians famously lost the First Chechen War, but they perpetrated a massive genocide there nonetheless. So they managed to get a peace treaty. Well, not a peace treaty. They got a ceasefire, the Khasavyurt Accord, in August of 1996 because they were losing so badly. And they crawled back, licked their wounds, regenerated their forces, and came back in October of 1999. Despite the numerous peace treaties, the peace treaty and the ceasefire that they signed with the Chechens, so the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria was technically independent, and they've conducted a whole slew of false flag operations back in August of 1999 and September of 1999. The reason I'm bringing it up because treaties with the Russians are kind of pointless and useless. You sign a ceasefire agreement, you sign a peace treaty with them, they'll just use the time to their advantage. They will regenerate their forces, they will build up their propaganda efforts, they'll think of false flag operations, and they'll just go back in and try again. And the Second Chechen War went a lot better for them. They conducted more genocide, and overall, a country that had a population, and I'm talking about Ichkeria, of course, a country that had a population just above 1 million before the first Chechen War, ended up losing 300,000 people. So 30% of the population. There was a genocide happening, and that was perpetrated by the Russians in the 90s and early 2000s, and the world just decided to ignore it and look the other way in the hopes of integrating the Russian economy into the world. All of this was happening while the West was actively pumping money into the Russian Federation, first in the 90s in the form of development loans and outright humanitarian aid, and later on just simple investments into their oil and gas sectors and other resource extraction industries. But as we can see now, integration with them doesn't work, treaties with them don't work. So hopefully people start realizing that now, gradually.
Yeah, understand. All right, we're going to go to Bloke because he's having horrific connection problems, and hopefully he can get out his question before that kills him. Bloke, you're up.
All right. Where did you lose me? Was it about the Russian person who's living here now who said that he literally told me that Russians have to starve before they'll change, right? They need to take personal responsibility. And the other thing that I find a bit outrageous is Scholz, saying that, we don't believe in collective punishment. Does he not understand that the prosperous Germany that he lives in right now only became that way because of an outright defeat? Okay? Germany had to be defeated before it could be turned into a democracy, a prosperous democracy. And likewise, the only thing we should be concentrating on now is ensuring that Russia is defeated in Ukraine. It's the only way that Russia will be able to have any chance of anything in the future, including reform. So we shouldn't think too much about anything else other than, and I don't care about collective punishment. I mean, you could argue that Germany was collectively punished for their responsibility in the Nazi regime. But it was through their defeat that they became a prosperous democracy. So I think we just have to keep laser focused on assisting Ukraine to defeat Russia. And that was my only point.
No argument from this party. Looks like I am our only co-host right now. Completely agreed with you, Bloke. We're going to move on to some other hands. Jonathan has been waiting super patiently, as has Just the Bunny. So we're going to go to Jonathan first. Jonathan, you're up.
I just wanted to say, part of, I guess, parlaying on what Adi said, I very much worry about there being a second Ukraine war, because even if Russia is completely kicked out of Ukraine, the war will still be on for them. They will just use a truce or any kind of ceasefire to rearm and possibly do this again. And what I was saying earlier about some kind of revival of the Cold War propaganda against Russia, I don't say that out of any kind of naivety of an American, actually half not American, but I don't say that out of naivety as in, the good Russians, turn them to democracy. It's to cause an uprising. It's cause the youth to get the message, which I think they did in the Cold War one way or another, and that use that underpinning to destroy Russia, because this isn't going to be over when the cannons stop firing. This kind of war it could go on and on and on, and Russia could come back and try again after they rearm.
Yeah, no. Hopefully, one of the things that the both huge amount of destruction that this war is causing to their young men, I would say unfortunately for the young men, but their horrific level of atrocities, their committee makes me have absolutely no feelings of sorrow for them because, well, their behavior is absolutely appalling and disgusting, and I don't have enough verbs and adjectives and nouns for the level of disgustingness it is. So yes, one, they're going to be out of people to fight another war at this scale in 5-10 years, and two, the economic sanctions aren't going to disappear anytime soon, and they're going to have some serious internal issues. So hopefully they will not be able to mount some sort of ridiculous offensive where they go try to genocide somebody and kill huge amounts of people. So with that, I think Just a Bunny has been waiting forever, and so I'd like to go to them.
Just a second. Yeah, so the thing that I was gonna add there was when Maddie was speaking, he mentioned the quote I had from Jahar Dudaev, and another quote that he had that I think is worth sharing, especially considering the fact that like there's a lot of people, like I said, daydreaming about wonderful Russias of the future and how they're gonna be, how we're gonna fix this, what's gonna happen afterwards. The thing is, I think a lot of these kinds of opinions come from like a kind of unfamiliarity with Russia, its history, how it treats its neighbors, how it treats the people that it conquers. And his quote really summarizes it in a very concise way, where he said that Russia, throughout all her history, whenever she's faced difficulties, sought agreements that she from the outset intended to violate to buy time, regroup, fix mistakes, and strike again.
Yeah, the solution to them not striking again, I believe, is a nice, strong Ukrainian win, which it looks like they are quickly heading towards. Doesn't seem like a lot of Russians are feeling that Crimean vacation right now that they used to be on. I'd like to go to Konstantin for a Ukrainian voice on this, whose hand just went up, so I'm assuming that's in reference to that. And then we're going to go back to our hand order.
You don't need Jahar Dudaev to understand that, but I just want to caution people when they address Jahar Dudaev quotes. There is so much manipulation and lies, not from him, but about his quotes, what he really said, and what he really did not. People tend to, make fake memes, make fake quotes, and I don't know if he really said this or not. I totally agree with that, but just be careful when you quoting him. It's not related to discussion, but just be very careful with he's been used for lots of things.
That quote in particular was from an interview he gave, so just thought I'd put that out there.
Yeah, great. That totally agree with it.
Yeah, thanks, Konstantin. I think it's always good to, he's just giving, I think, a general word of caution when it comes to if you see a quote from this particular guy. So, as Just a Bunny said, he can vet that particular one. So, thanks.
I know. I heard this one. Just saying that be very careful. There are so many lies with his quotes. People, especially Russian propaganda, tries to manipulate them. And in the end, you can look like a fool, posting something that has never been said by him. But this, I totally agree with this, and he did say that.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I totally don't know the order of hands. So there's so many. Finance, go ahead.
Donetsk, full
yeah,
alert.
all right. Huge
This
numbers
message
of
has
hands.
been generated
I
with
think
municipal
our
data.
order is Donnie, Alona, Gurney. Jonathan, you got a hot mic. For whatever reason, I cannot mute mics right now. Please un-hot mic it. If people hot mic, I'm gonna have to pull people down. We have too big a panel to deal with it. Donnie, you're up. Are you there? Donnie going once. Donnie going twice. Sold to Alona, you're up. Donnie.
Hey, hello again, guys.
Air siren
Yeah,
alert
just wanted
update.
to
Donetsk,
weigh in on
full
kind
alert.
on the
This
hope
message
that
has been
like
generated
Russia
with
will
municipal data.
run out of people, it will run out of money in a few years. I don't see actually any indication of that happening. Like any reason to believe that that's certain, because seeing that the European countries right now are pumping more money into Russia than they were before the full-scale invasion started, and seeing that we are still talking, like countries are still talking about, oh, like we need to save Putin's face, and we cannot alienate a superpower. I don't see any indication of that happening, of Russia running out of money and sanctions not being relaxed. I don't think that justice is actually promised, and I think it's very dangerous to assume, seeing especially that we are even having a conversation about whether Russians should have tourist visas to Europe during a genocide. I think that's a very good indication of the extent of colonialism and unfairness that is happening. And Ukrainians are just seen as people that are not equal to Russians. And so our problems just don't concern the vast majority of the world. Unfortunately, I'm not saying that that's with everyone like that, of course not. But due to this colonialism, problems of Ukrainians, the actual tragedy and genocide that's happening of Ukrainians as in Ukraine, it just bothers a lot of people a lot less than the ability of Russians to travel to Europe. And I feel like the very fact that this discussion is even happening is a testament to what I'm saying right now. So let's not assume that justice will be served just because it happened last time, just because after the World War II, Germany was held accountable for its actions. During the World War II, Nazi Germans did not travel to Europe.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I don't know why. No, I take that back. I do know why Schultz is saying that he wants to defend Russian short-stay visas, because he likes to lick Putin's boots. He wakes up in the morning, he licks Putin's boots. When Putin comes home from work, he gives him a massage and cooks him dinner. That's why he's doing it. But other than that, yeah, I agree with you. It's absolutely ridiculous and 100% that shouldn't be happening. If Russians want to go to Europe, they can ask for asylum because they live in a disgusting, vile, murderous regime, and they should have to sign a statement that says they 100% disagree with the war and Putin, the kind of statement that would say make it relatively difficult for them politically to walk back in, or at least, it could be viewed that way. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think I want to go back to Alona because she might have a follow-up, and then we're going to go to Donnie, who is back up here. We assume we can hear again.
Yeah, last quick comment, and I just put it up in the net, the tweet that I'm talking about. Like, when we are told about how hard it is in Russia to protest and to fight with the state, it's laughable for Ukrainians right now to be, and it's actually it's outrageous for us to be listening about this. The situation in Ukraine, thanks to Russia's influence again, was not that different just a few years ago, and Ukrainians had to pay a very, very high price for the consequences of Russia trying to instill a pro-Russian government in Ukraine. We had to fight, we had to lose some of our best people's lives that time, and now we are having to pay to make an even larger sacrifice. Like, we are sacrificing our best people right now. And so for us to be told about the struggles that Russians have to go through in order to protest, I want to ask, and so then how is letting out more Russians of that, how is it going to help anything? Someone has to end this regime, right? So who's going to be cleaning up that mess? Like, why do we have to do this all the time and being blamed for it and called Nazis at the same time? And they can just get get the hell out of that and have a latte in Vilnius or something. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's really baffling.
Yeah, I have a really great idea. I think that Russia should clean up their own mess for the first time ever. They could even start by taking home the bodies of all their dead soldiers that they just keep leaving in Ukraine. They could also, take back all their landmines. Whether they walk over them or clean them up, I really don't care, but they should take it all back too. Will they do any of this? Probably not, because, when was the last time they actually took responsibility for the vile murderous actions? I literally don't think it's happened since Ivan the Terrible. Completely agreed with you on absolutely everything you had to say, and you say it better than I do. I'm just pissed about it, as I'm sure you are. In fact, probably more than I am, because it is your home nation that you grew up in. Donnie has dropped and come back up, and he was before Alona. So Donnie, you're up.
Hey, thanks. I had a question for you, Finance, about Schultz is just announced that he's coming to Canada to visit with Trudeau and take a tour of our country. My question is, do you think it's in regards to their energy concerns and whether it's number one, LNG, or number two, maybe getting some nuclear fuel for their older reactors back up and running? Question.
Wait, I actually lost you at the very first part. Are we asking about Russia or Kazakh?
No. Schultz. Schultz is meeting with Trudeau in the coming weeks. He's coming here to Canada and touring parts of Canada. And I'm guessing it's to safeguard some energy for the winter. And I'm wondering if it's going to be LNG or if it's going to be securing some nuclear fuel for reactors that they should get started.
I have no idea. I can't speculate at all. If Schultz actually figured out that he could turn on his nuclear power plants and fix his and a bunch of Europe's problems, that would be a really good thing. He has purposefully not been doing that so far because his best buddy Putin doesn't want him to. And, every time he licks Putin's boots, he's told he can't do that. And that's be really, really bad for his buddy Putin. But maybe, just maybe, he's realizing that he should, in fact, do that so that his countrymen don't freeze this winter. But, I'm never one to go long on... I'm never one to go long on Olaf Scholz and pretty much anything on being the right side of history or anything on being against Russia. So who knows? Hopefully both. I really don't have anything. I don't want to pretend further. I believe we have Gurney up next, but even I've lost flow. Yes, Gurney, Konstantin, Fargan, Daniel is our order. Gurney, you're up.
Thanks, Finance. I wanted to sort of address Jonathan directly. It looks like he dropped off there, unfortunately. But I wanted to address a few things in there directly, and I think he's being genuine. I can sort of understand some of his concerns, but there's sort of some fallacies in some of the arguments, and I'm sure it was just a coincidence. Some people state where they're from. It may be a little odd, not everyone does, but I'll just take it as a coincidence that it's the seat of American power. For whatever that's worth, there was whatever need to broadcast that. Just take it as a coincidence. But the real message here is, so there was the first question I had addressed earlier in terms of responding to potential future states when the current state is upon you, the current present tense, and that is the war in Ukraine. It kind of makes that effort not completely futile, but 99% futile. And so directly to that second, the second point there, Jonathan, talking about sort of, there was a statement made, I don't want to repeat it, but this may go on forever. Okay, I mean, if we get into circular reasoning on issues like this, well, this may go on forever, so why do anything? That sort of thinking, whether it breeds inaction from a common person, why do anything at all? Because this existential problem is there, and so it's in one form or another. You believe it's going to persist. There's sort of this wiggle room that some people believe that hey, I'll just throw my hands up, and why even deal with it? But we know that to not be true, because we know the solutions to be within grasp, and we know that the only thing you can do is act in the current state. And so sort of doing all this circular reasoning to focus on end states, it's highly irrelevant because you do not know what the end state is, but you know what you can do. You can control the present as best you can, and that is peace through victory. As simple as that. I'll take all the other points as coincidences. That the Kremlin likes to use talking points like this. It's because it's dangerous logic to do that. But I do share your concerns for the future state. I just think that the fruits of worrying about that or belaboring that point are not only irrelevant, but they're potentially harmful.
Can I respond to that real quickly?
Yes, Jonathan.
I think you misunderstand me, sir. I'm an engineer. I'm not the best public speaker that there is. So I completely agree with you that nothing but Ukraine's victory that is the first and foremost thing. What I was actually trying to convey, I guess, was this is something that can be done to cause the disintegration of Russia now in real time in the next year. I just wanted to add to that I have an Israeli perspective on this, and I know a lot of people have very strong opinions about Israel and the Palestinian conflict. So putting the Palestinian conflict of the current day aside for a moment, Israel had some horrible wars and had a lot of Russian weaponry aimed at them for many years, and they fought wars again and again and again, and the only thing that put a stop to it, Israel became a very powerful, skilled, albeit tiny military. And I think that is exactly what is going to be Ukraine's future. They already are one of the most experienced and stable militaries in the world right now. I think after this war, they are going to be arming themselves to the teeth with both material and intelligence.
No. I hear where you're going. I will say that we're going to quote President Zelensky here. We'll just go to the top, where he said, at one point, he did say that a possible future for Ukraine in the post-war scenario is that he expects Ukraine will turn into big Israel, by which he meant heavily militarized, but also heavily democratic. For those of you who don't like the Israel analogy, I know that's the one he used, you could also look to a similar approach in Switzerland or Finland. Finland, of course, bordering the genocidal aggressor Russia, so they really understand, right? Mandatory draft in all three countries, but they're also all democratic countries. These are countries where everybody votes. And Israel, they vote like 3 times a year right now because they can't get it together, but that's their issue. But these are countries where people vote. Switzerland votes, Finland votes, strong democratic norms, strong institutions, relatively strong societal cohesion, right? But
just wanted to add that.
So yeah, that's there. So that's there. Zelensky has said that is absolutely the kind of future he expects, because they need to be able to defend themselves against Russia, right? They're not going to rely on anyone else.
I just wanted to add, though, that I don't mean to make direct comparisons. Nothing Israel ever went through. I've been there for a few bombardments, and they weren't fun. 2014. What Ukraine is going through is infinitesimally more horrible and worse. The ability and the likelihood of Russia coming to agreements like Egypt and Jordan came to, it just isn't there. So Israel is a tiny country. The War of 67, my father was in. The War of 73, my father was in, and my family was in. It was very, very small compared to what Ukraine is going through. And what Ukraine is going through is so much more horrible, and I do realize that.
in Jonathan, perhaps the misunderstanding, just to give you a perspective here, perhaps part of the consternation caused, at least in myself, is when you make that statement that seems very genuine, but you lead with the statement of, but what about the Russian people? See, I'm just saying, putting those two statements close together in time and in consecutive arguments,
I don't
it
think
sort
I
of
said
muddies.
that, sir.
Well, your first question there, sir, was yes. Actually, it was asking about the future state of the Russians and are they all good or are they all bad? But again, look, we're splitting semantics here. I'm just saying, if that was a simple misunderstanding, absolutely, you've cleared that up for us. That Ukraine faces an existential threat here, and the only way through it is through victory. Thank you.
All right. I think that takes care of Gurney. I think we're agreed. I believe Constantine is next, but it might be Daniel. Not even sure. Which one of you wants to go next?
I'll go and I'll try to be brief. All the discussions about Russians, good Russians, bad Russians, visas, support or whatever, there is one simple solution. Like if you want to keep the visas for Russians, if you're Scholz or anyone, if Ukraine wins this war, things gonna be figured out by themselves pretty quickly. So the key here, that's like the most and super important part. Make sure that Ukraine wins, and there is a way to do this, and those ways are cheap and straightforward. Giving Ukrainians weapons in large amounts and helping Ukrainians with the trainings. Well, and of course keeping up the Ukrainian economy until this is over. You can, for the combined free world, it's as cheap as buying a new refrigerator for middle class man in America. I mean, yeah, it's gonna pull out some cash from his pocket, but nothing more than that. It can be done. It can be done easily. So that should be the focus. The rest, I mean, when we come up and argue, those are just supplemental things like visas, like sanctions. I mean, they are important. They must be there. But the key is always helping Ukraine win the war. And winning the war is giving more weapons, helping with the training, and supporting the economy. And it's cheap, fast, and reliable. Do that, and you will have things, prices back to normal, people, economies back to normal, and everyone will be happy. Everyone, including Russians. You will be surprised, but including Russians, because they will. It's like a fast operation by getting your ass kicked. You get your ass kicked. You understand that you have to shut the fuck up. You step back, and you learn your lessons. It's good for everyone.
I have absolutely nothing to follow that up with. Does anybody else here wish to?
I would like to.
All right, Fargan.
First, I would just say to Jonathan that I don't share his worries at all about a second war. I assume that as soon as we kick Russia out of Ukraine, we're going to stack up F-35s or some kind of NATO forward exercises or whatever. So I think the solution is through engineering, and that is to continue to arm Ukraine with weapons. And as soon as we can, we will accept them into EU and NATO, and then Russia will never bother us again.
I would be a fan of that approach, but either way, I think that first Ukraine needs to beat the living daylights out of Russia, not because that's their preferred course of action, but, well, at this point it is, but because they need to get their sovereign territory back and they need to get their citizens back, which is currently up to 500,000, if memory serves. We're over 500,000 children kidnapped and 2 to 3 million other adult civilians. Like, it's insanely high numbers. With that, our order is Daniel, Madi.
Okay, I just wanted to say, yes, a second war is not a concern at all. We need to focus on hurting Russia until they retract.
Yeah, Russia has their own country. They can go back there and they can very nicely and politely send Ukraine her many citizens back. Daniel, Madi, Nancy is our order.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, finance is no place for me to explain to Jonathan. Israel never used Russian weapons, and their army is anything but tiny, and their existential wars were exactly like Ukraine. Exactly. When you are attacked by 5 countries and all Arab League in 47 was not funny at all. And Ukraine is just the blueprint to become the same thing, but a bigger scale. And we close this can of worms because usual people who like Palestinians will talk bad about Israel. I will never keep Hamas and Hezbollah in my hands and jihadi Islam. Okay, about visas. Visa talk there. So Bundeskanzler said he is not agree with tourist visa ban, but he had a problem. There are no direct planes from Moscow to Berlin or Frankfurt. For Russians, the problem is first Finland, second Baltics, easy access. Baltics already closed that door. Poland for their to go to Warsaw for any Russian at this moment is like going to hell. They know what does it mean to go to Poland. And any Russian who lives in Poland are very, very clearly anti-Putinist, anti-war, because you cannot survive in Poland talking bullshit like they do in Germany. Even if you ban the tourist visa, will be a problem because we have the golden passports of Hungary, Malta, and Cyprus. So they can take Turkish airline plane, go to Larnaca, and from Cyprus you can fly easy to Rome. And that golden visa or even golden passport for them is easy accessible anywhere they want to go, except maybe United States because border police there is not so respectful with oligarchs. But for Russians, this is very, very bad because you read Kamil Galil explain to you what happens when you are interdicted to Europe. It's like don't get the Chanel purse and your newest iPhone. And Mehdi will confirm this because yesterday I saw the second time they get the papers for recruitment in St. Petersburg. This is very, very, very bad for the regime. If you go to St. Petersburg and call people, you know, he wants to leave for the motherland, they will not be happy. And if the borders is closed with Finland and Baltics, everyone which is not an oligarch but had some money and can spend, they will be pissed. With Turkey, even if you put visa ban, Turkey had the business. 88 asta. 88 la fereastră, 82 la margine.
Are you ordering enough for all of us, Daniel?
Can you say again?
I said, are you ordering enough food for all of us?
Oh, no, in train. Going to mountains. Okay, I think my point was obvious. Okay?
Thank you, Daniel. Marty, you're back up, then Nancy.
I'll try to be very quick. I just wanted to expand on what Konstantin said. People do talk about end states, and you probably know finance, I like speculating. But this is the kind of speculation that I really like thinking of, because an outright victory by the Ukrainians could potentially mean a total collapse of the Russian Federation, of the latest iteration of the Russian Empire. And when I say total victory, I mean the Ukrainians take back everything, take back all of the currently occupied territories, including Crimea and whatever they occupied in the Donbas region before February 24th, for a few reasons. First off, we got the economic sanctions, which is a growing list every day, and hopefully those sanctions will just keep on expanding. That chokes their economy, and that will present the Russian authorities with the choices that we've discussed before, where they have to redirect their funds. But at the same time, an outright Ukrainian victory would mean a profound psychological shock to the Russian population. If they take back the Crimea, if they take the Crimean Peninsula, if they take back Donbas, they will know that they were defeated by someone who's they kept on thinking is inferior to them, because for generations they've been told that the Ukrainians are just either inferior Russians or just an outright inferior kind of second-class citizens or a second-class nation. This is supported by actual statistics. Back in 2014, when the Crimean Peninsula was occupied by the Russians, there's been a significant increase in the public support to the Russian government and to Putin himself as well. If I remember correctly, the Levada Center conducted a poll of the general population in Russia and found out that the support for Putin skyrocketed from 60% to 87%. That 27% increase is just insane. And if the peninsula is taken back by the Ukrainians, I suspect that the opposite would happen. Well, I hope the opposite would happen, where the public support for the not just for the government, but also for Putin would just tank immediately. And when you combine that with the tough economic situation that the Russians are going to be facing with every single day, they will have to start thinking in terms of what's going on in their country. While I do think that someone brought up a point where the Russians are not going to be troubled with the political situation unless they're starving, while I do think that is certainly a possibility, I still think that excuse me, I still think that an outright Ukrainian victory, along with the economic sanctions, would actually stir the pot and make the Russians actually start thinking long and hard and take some collective action. And yes, it's going to be a lot cheaper to provide the Ukrainians with all the arms and weapons rather than dealing with the Russian Federation as a persistent aggressor later on. The West had an opportunity to finish the job of decolonizing Russia back in '91, but yeah, we've already discussed what the West chose.
Thank you, Marty. Look, if even one or two ethnic republics breaks off, I'll call it a win after this war if they somehow gain independence. You know, I'm a little less serene on that front. I sadly have the view that horrific atrocities and oppression often work. So hopefully some people get some decentralization and some personal liberty, as it were, rather than the crap they get now out of Russia. But You can hear in the tone of my voice how optimistic I am for that. That said, let's go to Nancy.
Yeah, mic check, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Marty, you stole part of my thunder there. When I hear the discussions of, what intrinsically sounds like what's next for Russia, and the risk of, what happens if there's a total collapse of Russia. Honestly, the world as a whole has had a chance since 1991. We've had decades to try and figure that out, and everyone's been so terrified of what the hell that means. But we've had decades to figure out a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, a plan E, and none of those plans should ever have needed to involve Russia invading other countries. And Ukraine is just the next in a slew of activities they've done like this. And when it comes to the question of visas, one of the things that I looked at is, how many people, the question I have is, number one, how many people does that really impact? I think that the Eastern European countries were spot on by saying that traveling out of country is a privilege and not a right. And I actually, of course, I couldn't get any good stats on Russia's travel, but I was able to find stats from 2019 in Forbes magazine on the United States and how many people have ever traveled outside of their country. And over at that point in time, and again, we've had a pandemic since then, so I doubt the numbers have gone up, but over half of the people surveyed had never even owned a passport. Now, of course, for years, U.S. didn't have to have a passport to get to Mexico, Canada, or cruises. We do now. But 11% of respondents said they'd never traveled outside of the state they were born. And the Russian oblasts are larger in many cases than American states. And I almost have to wonder when it's very interesting how talking about limiting Russian travel visas has hit such a nerve. And it is a privilege, not a right. But I question the people who are the privileged in Russia, the people who cannot afford toilets and running water in their homes are not the people who are impacted by this. It's the upper middle class in Russia who would be impacted by a travel visa. And those are the people that, honestly, the powers that be in Russia want to keep calm, want to keep sedated at this point in time. Why are breweries being opened back up there for multinational corporations? It's, to sedate the population. And I say just, let those chips fall. And initially I was very hesitant about that, but the more I looked at it, I'm like, nope, let those chips fall. Let them be impinged. We're not talking about life safety. We're not talking about health safety. Let them feel discomfort. Maybe it will, one, potentially give them a chance to understand that there's more outside of their privilege. And if it focuses them to look on, well, maybe I should travel within my country. Holy crap, my country's a mess. If it impacted the thoughts of even 1% of the population, it would be worth it. And in the meantime, just put up the walls, just separate them, and let us focus on Ukraine and the fight they need to have. But I think that the global politicians who were afraid of a total collapse of Russia in 91 need to have their shit together at this point, because I don't see any way that it doesn't happen now, unless everyone just bends to their will. And I certainly don't see the Ukrainians willing to do that. And I fully support their desire to be fully independent of any Russian influence.
I would like to briefly go to Daniel Arfire for him to say to everybody what he's currently sending me messages and is absolutely hilarious. And then we'll go to Constantine. Daniel.
Okay, I want to say Leffe is my favorite beer, and it's very expensive because it's Belgian, and Russians are not so big beer drinkers. For them, beer like Leffe is about status. You go to a restaurant and command expensive shit. But when you saw people running for sugar, they're running for sugar because with potatoes or grains, we can make moonshine, and they are heavy drinkers. So if you need to be dumb, drink vodka, not Leffe.
So are you saying the Russians are alcoholics, Daniel?
And drug addicts, because I think Talibans love Russians how much they love heroin.
All right. On that lovely note, with Daniel Arfire's very strong opinions on the prospects for Russian drug dealers, let's go to Constantine.
I actually put my hand down because I think we have beaten the topic of Russian visas to the ground, and I just wanted to reiterate once again: arming Ukraine and keeping its economy going is cheap and reliable, and it's gonna end the war in Ukrainian victory. Russia is gonna pull back, and things will go back to normal. Meanwhile, the Europe will have enough time to stabilize its dependency on the Russia, and things once again will go back to normal. And Europe should keep the fence up, and it should not be visas are visas there for a reason. And when people say like let's cut the tourist visas, for example, you can not, you can say, okay, we'll keep the visas, but getting those visas will have different requirements. That can also happen. But I think we have, and that requirement may as well be, denouncing your affiliation with the Russian government or whatever. You can make whatever requirements you want, but the idea that it should be increased. But I actually remembered why I put my hand up. There was discussion about Scholz traveling to Canada, and some idea that it's been lurking in my mind, and I wanted to ask, maybe we have smart enough people, not like me, who actually can give an insight on this. Is it possible to build a pipeline from North America to Europe, gas pipeline? Is it possible, or that is something that is not absolutely doable, and just, not in terms of, there is also always a economic perspective, and there is also, a different perspective, which is physical one, like you cannot do it physically. So I'm just wondering about both of those.
Economics isn't usually divorced from other things as much as people like to pretend it is. So often I will be here as the finance guy being like, this isn't, either A, the economics isn't the primary motivator, like in this war, or B, it's not something sort of divorced from its own other political realities. So It's just a general point when we talk about economics. I had 1 million hands. Now I have no hands. Welcome to the speaker panel, Dennis and Jerome. The order that they came up was Jerome, then Dennis. So y'all are up in that order. Jerome.
Good evening. Am I fair to say it's kind of open topic at the moment?
Fire away. Topic of choice.
I wonder if Gurney was here. I think he may be present. It was really interesting the other night. It was actually Craig made the argument that the Russian plan was based on political. I'm simplifying it and maybe not transcribing it best, but if anybody remembers Craig's point, I really agreed with it, and I was actually looking for another historical example of it to kind of match up against it. So his point was basically that the Russians didn't plan militarily. They just didn't understand how democracies work. And we all know the story. They planned on a 3-day fold, and then so their plan was based on political, and the military planning was obviously lacking. Now, obviously, I think all military is political, right, to the end. But I think, again, I'm not really explaining his point exactly. So maybe if someone else was here, but my real question was, in a perfect world, Jason Giroux was there at that conversation, and I would ask him, can we get another historical example of that kind of maybe really heavy political goal with bad military planning around it? And maybe that's a nothing topic either.
Well, we do have Gurney up. So Gurney.
Yeah. So I was Jerome. I was there with Craig, and I think Craig and I were sort of going back and forth, agreeing, but just explaining different perspectives, talking about that. I had mentioned the Russians were. This isn't. I'm not breaking any news here, right? This is just previous reporting. The Russians had made some political assumptions. They made a lot of investments, and I would sort of one of the terms you use, I'd sort of invert it. You said, because the Russians don't understand democracy, is why this may have happened. I would say it's actually because the exact opposite. Because the Russians believed, whether it was hubris or overconfidence or a poor cycle of their own polls and their own people telling them sort of things they wanted to hear, and this sort of reinforcements ago. I would say this war happened. The timing of this, again, it's been going on since 2014, but I would say actually the cause of this is because the Russians think they understand democracy well, and that they have tools and capabilities that they believe can undermine democracies. But I think that's exactly what you're saying. That's how I would describe it. But I was there for that. And so when you're looking for examples, I don't have anything on the top of my head, but I would maybe point you in a direction, and they might be more frequent than we think, and that's not because of failed ones. I would point you to the examples where something has happened so quickly or abruptly overnight or over the course of a matter of days that when we think of it now, it's just a blip on our sort of historical radars, meaning I'm sure there's many more instances in our recent history where these sort of political calculations have been made, and whether someone has described it as a coup or a government in exile or whatever you want to say, special operation. There's a lot of things, but I would sort of point you to look in the directions of those, and there's some better historians out here who could probably look to different countries for some examples. I'm sure they exist, but I'm sure that actually the success rate is probably higher than we realize when the political calculus is done right. But in this case, it wasn't. So this is exactly what has happened, right? And now, because the Ukrainians are able to fight back. One, and because the Russians did not accurately assess the situation on the ground, regardless of their years of buildup and paying off people in industry and trying to build up a network of informants to do this, the consequence of them not being able to accurately assess is exactly where we are right now. But this is obviously, from the Russian perspective, a train wreck, and so for our, for as it doesn't register as a blip on our radar, it registers as a big, enormous, egregious action by the Russians. But I would encourage you, Jerome, to sort of look at those historical examples, and whether or not they apply to this is, that might be completely irrelevant. But I would just say, I bet there's more historical examples where things like this have actually worked in favor of the party that moved to aggress, but probably different.
What about U.S. to Baghdad? I mean, that was pretty political, and it worked for a while. Then I guess the insurgency and whatnot. And other really great point I thought that night was the fact that the Russians, since they don't think of Ukraine as a people or country, didn't expect the national response since they don't consider it a nation. So that was also a great point I thought.
Yeah, thanks, Jerome. I think you said it there. Baghdad is something different, right? Separating out a military achievement from the actual political achievement is that sort of in that example took place at different times. I'll leave it at that. But a different era, different type of activity there, where you can win tactically. Or you can have a strategic military victory, but you can still lose the political grand strategy.
Yep, thank you for that. You always bring really. Were you in the military, Gurney? You always have a very interesting take.
Yeah, a couple months back, I used to introduce myself as that. It either stuck or it faded from memories.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost home, and thank you everybody for keeping this going, and always helps to settle out the night.
Thank you, Jerome. Dennis, you had your hand up, came down. I think you were still waiting to speak, though. So, Dennis.
Oh, yeah. Hi. So, I'm Dennis. I'm from Russia. I'm sorry. And I'm from Moscow, and I wanted to speak about the visas, if this is still a thing.
Are you in Russia currently, sir, or are you out of Russia now?
No, I'm right exactly in Russia. I'm in Moscow right now. So, I'm like Russian. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, that's quite a topic right here, and people are obsessed with that. And that's the first time the sanctions just got that big interest as such in the spotlight. Even the most opposition-oriented people are pissed off because of these visas, and I'm the only person in our opposition circles who's yay, no visas for us, please. Do it more countries without visas. But I think that's actually a good thing, because for the last 6 months or even more, even before the war, I was just speaking with the leaders of Russian opposition, and I was like, we need to do something, because we didn't have any protests since I think 2020, and everything just getting into shit. What should we do? And they just told, we need to wait a little bit, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And then there was a war, and people were like, okay, now no protests, we can do this. And we had some when the war started, but there were just so little people. I was there, and we were completely demolished by the police from the get-go. So and a lot of people who oppose Putin, they just fled to other countries. And now what I can see in our political or activistic landscape is that we have just individuals, but we have no groups at all. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to stand up and just say something, especially because now many people will have no other options because they will have to stay in Russia and think about Russia, not about themselves. Yeah. So I think that's a good thing. And when people say that, okay, but Europe was our last resort, it was the place where you can flee or police comes to your door. I don't think so, because my point is that we need to stop yelling at Europe and start yelling at Putin, because that's not just because Europe hates Russia and they have every right to hate us, but that's because that's what we did to ourselves, and we need to face it. And it's not like I don't know, collective guilt, because guilt is individual. It's collective responsibility, and we have to face it, and we have to do something. So yeah, my hot take is that this visa thing can help us to raise. So thank you, Europe. I hope it will work. And it looks like it's working, because a lot of people are now just irritated, but I think that after some thinking, they will get into the right direction. That was my take. Thank you.
Constantine, would you like to respond to that?
I don't have much response. I just, you're in Russia. Which could you say which region are you from?
I'm from Moscow.
Yeah. So just I want to say keep fighting, and no matter how much we in Ukraine have problems with when I say have problems, how much we hate what there is a large hatred in Ukraine right now against all the Russians, but at the same time people understand that the fact that you live in Russia does not mean that 100% are those who should die or anything like that. It's hard for us, to even think, even talk with people like you at the moment. It's really hard. There is a barrier because it feels like I'm doing something wrong when I'm speaking with you right now. I honestly have this feeling. But we do, we're people, and that's what distinguishes us from the animals, is that we can control our, urge and desire to just to hate everything and kill it. We think about it, and we can control our emotions and our actions. So while I do this, I tell you we appreciate the fact that there are people who are ready to fight the regime, who understand that this is wrong, what is happening, and I'm just gonna shut up right now before I start saying something else.
I really appreciate it, and I understand all the hate, because I feel this hate even for myself almost every day, especially because Russian people look so egoistic right now, and I see a lot of what will we do right now? How can we? What's happening? Oh, poor Russians, and that pisses me off, because I've never seen such a huge reaction about any crimes with it. But now when you can go to Paris, it's suddenly now I see the problem, and that pisses me off, and that brings a lot of hate in my heart too. So you're not alone, and I'm really grateful that no one yells at me, because I understand that every Russian completely deserves it. And yeah, thank you.
Do you work in IT?
No, I work in marketing, so close to IT, but not IT at all.
There are a lot of people, in IT who in Russia that do support Ukraine. Just was asking as a just wondering. And yeah, anyway, I'm gonna drop. Thank you for having me here, and I hope you will have a great evening. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Konstantin. Pleasure having you as always. Fargan, and then we have a question from the audience for Dennis. Fargan.
I have a question for Dennis too. When I see interviews with Putin, he portrays himself as a great thinker and quotes history and all that stuff. And I wonder, how can you not, in Russia, think, no matter if you are Putin supporter or not, how can you not think, how could he get this so wrong? How could he make such a catastrophic mistake? That's all.
Personally, I don't think he is a great thinker or that he knows history. He has some distorted, half imperialistic, half, I don't even know, bullshitty version of history that doesn't connect to reality in any way. So, yeah, personally, I don't think he is good at anything but plastic surgery. So, it was not a single mistake. It was like a long way of mistakes. There was a nice article some days ago about dictatorship, and that you don't get born as a dictator, or you don't just need to be a special person to become one. So yeah, at first he even tried to do something, but he did it in a very wrong way, and then he thought, okay, I did it in a wrong way, so I need to cover this, and then I need to cover the cover, and then it's like the huge snowball that just goes worse and worse. And if a person is not stopped on some point of this way, he will get worse and worse and worse. And we've seen it, like the evolution of his atrocity, and how at first I'll take the TV, then I'll take Georgia, then I'll do more and more and more. And so now we are at the point where he is almost unstoppable. He is not unstoppable, but almost, because he has all the power and he has no empathy at all. So he can commit any crime, and he thinks that he's right, that he has absolute righteousness in every way possible. So yeah, now we have a fucked up, crazy dictator, and we think how we got here. And we got here because we were just too lazy, too comfortable, because after the 90s, everybody just wanted to have nice food, great electronics, and a lot of travel. So yeah, we got comfortable. We were okay with little atrocities, and then it just got bigger. So it's completely our fault, not just Russians, all the world, because the great analogy for what Russia is to the world is what Chechnya is to Russia, because the way Putin tried to solve the Chechnya problem is by just giving a lot of money. Just, fuck it, I will give more money and more money and more money. Oh yeah, they're crazy. They're just killing people in the streets. They are kidnapping people and killing the entire families. Oh, I will just give them more money and I don't give a shit. And that's exactly what the world did to Russia, just pumping and pumping and pumping Putin with money, making him bigger and bigger and more dangerous. And just like with Chechnya, we will have to face some consequences of this. And that's what happened, I think. So.
Well, I'd like to say welcome up to the space, Slava Ukraini. Always one of the few people here who can just jump the line as he pleases. Slava, how are you this morning for you?
Слава Україні, героям слава. Thank you. Actually, I'm good. Just wake up. Morning, quiet morning for me right now. And I have a question for the Dennis. I hear you. You're doing fine. Good for you. So, question for you. You said that you were lazy. So, my question for you: when did you notice change? Since we know that Putin always was in the power, when did you notice the change that something wrong with the power of the Putin? Meaning, when did you maybe notice that he's doing something wrong? Maybe something preparation, because in Ukraine we understood that it's not war in 2022. All started long before, maybe 20 years ago. Thank you.
Retrospectively, if I watch from this point in time, he was wrong all along. And I can say that bad things started to happen in 1996, actually. But that's retrospectively. Of course, I was just a little shit in 1996, so I wasn't thinking about politics at all. Yeah, but actually, I think when I came to Moscow from Design, I was already quite aware of Putin's atrocities, and it was like 2009. Yeah, and from I think 2012, most of people around me were well aware of Putin's crimes and that he's a criminal and that the troops just surround him. But in 2012, we had that power transit from Medvedev to Putin, and it was like the final point when everything just was crystal clear that we have a dictator and that he will not go away without us doing something. So yeah, I think that the pivotal point when most of us lost any illusion was 2012, and then it was 2014 when we were just like, what the fuck is it actually happening? Yeah, so I think the answer is 2012.
Thank you. Extensive answer. I like it. And so, like, if I understand correctly, after this point, you understood. I don't know. Is maybe everyone understood? You understood, but maybe not everyone understood that is going from bad to worse. But no one trying to stop it, and this is like a. Now 10 years that go to wars, and you see what is happening. I hope you understand what is happening in Ukraine. And you said previously, I think with the Konstantin, that you said that we should do something about it. But 10 years later, meaning today, what you can do? Because we know that there is now more and more support, and we know about the Siloviki. We know that regular Russians